So just before we get into today's video, all about how I think Battlefield Studios can make Battlefield 6 even better by fixing some stuff and adding a few things, I wanted to mention real quick, the defib bug that you saw in my last video, that's already been fixed by the devs. Apparently there was a change on the back end that they thought would make the experience better, but actually it ended up making the defib experience worse, so they've kind of reverted it and put it back to where it was. So props to the devs for fixing that really quickly. And people have been asking me over the last couple of weeks how I've made the white parts of my HUD yellow. People seem to really like that change, so here's how you do it. Head into Settings, Accessibility, Color Profiles, switch it to Custom at the top, and then head down to the neutral color and set that to like a yellowy orange. And if you want more vibrant colors in general, go into each of the colors and just make them more vibrant, and that will be reflected in your HUD too. Okay, so the Eastwood map for Battlefield 6 has been out for a few days now. I'm really enjoying it. I actually think it's right up there as one of the best maps available in the game. But it is hitting home some other elements that I've been thinking about at a higher level for Battlefield 6. Parts of the game where the team working on it at Battlefield Studios could really elevate the experience. I know a lot of people have their own opinions about what is good in this game and what is bad in this game, but the player numbers have been really solid since launch, and I've just been told recently that it's the top-selling shooter game of the year, so clearly the game is doing something right. But that doesn't mean that it can't be better, and there's several areas that I think, with updates over the coming weeks, the next few months going into Season 2, Season 3, Season 4, etc., that the game could really step up alongside the greats of the franchise like Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, which of course this game is using as inspiration. So I'm going to talk through some of these points today. I'm going to give my opinions, and I want you guys to give yours down below in the comments section too. Drop some thumbs up on other comments that you agree with from other people. And if you wouldn't mind, drop a like on the video whilst you're down there. That'll help spread it to more people so more people can give their opinions, because as I've said before, you never really know who's watching, who might see your opinion down there, might see your feedback, and they might act on it in the future. So first of all, I want to discuss the maps in Battlefield 6. There's no denying that they look absolutely incredible. I don't really think the visuals are up for debate here. But I think the general consensus from the community is that map sizes are trending a little bit too small compared to other titles in the franchise. For example, Siege of Cairo, it's a phenomenal urban warfare location that's been crafted, but it's quite small and it's very infantry focused. Then you've got Iberian Offensive, again a small urban warfare location. The maps on the larger end of the spectrum for this game, those aren't especially large by Battlefield standards. Operation Firestorm, despite having the same central layout for all of its conquest flags, it's had the more open areas of the map completely cut out, and the HQ locations in Conquest have been moved closer to the middle of the map, so it's actually smaller than what it was in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. Mirak Valley might look large, but all of the action happens in the middle of the map, and it's surrounded by massive open fields, which are far from ideal for gameplay. Battlefield 6 has got a selection of maps that are clearly designed in a way to funnel the action closer together, create these intense battles, and shorten the time to engagement considerably compared to other titles in the franchise. Now that's fine if you want to do that for some of the maps. The idea of compressing the action, shortening the time it takes for you to get into a gunfight or a battle for every single map isn't a good one. It leaves every map, despite them being visually and physically different, feeling very similar, because they're all designed around achieving the same style of gameplay. Previous Battlefield titles, Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 specifically, as the predecessors to Battlefield 6, employed a different strategy. Some of the maps featured more compressed layouts, like Battlefield 6, with a specific infantry focus. The likes of Operation Metro, Grand Bazaar, and Operation Locker spring to mind. But others, they open things up a little bit, and they focus more on combined arms gameplay. Maps like Caspian Border, Siege of Shanghai, and Zavod 311. And then we've got the big boys, like Rogue Transmission, Golmud Railway, and Karg Island. These leaned more heavily onto vehicle combat, with specific areas for interplay with infantry around capture points and POIs. Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 offered considerably more varied gameplay experiences at launch compared to Battlefield 6, each of them feeding the desires of different players. Battlefield 6 right now has very little variety when it comes to its maps. Eastwood is probably my favourite map for being able to combine all the different types of gameplay, but it still has its issues. For example, the massively reduced ceiling height for choppers makes them an easy target for infantry on the ground and sitting ducks for the AA tanks who just sit in spawn all game. This spawn, die, spawn, get a couple of kills, die, spawn, kill a vehicle, immediately die. That element to Battlefield 6's gameplay right across all of the maps in the game, considering all the different types of gameplay that it can support, it's like a chasing of short-term dopamine hits, this instant gratification where getting kills is somehow just becoming the sole focus. It's diluting the experience, and I think it's going to end up hurting the long-term success of the product. There is, of course, room for these experiences in Battlefield. Again, I'll point to the likes of Operation Metro and Operation Locker as examples of where this can work. But in previous games, they were the exceptions, not the rule. In Battlefield 6, we appear to have flipped that on its head, where the expansive sandbox-style gameplay that we know the franchise for and love it so much for is becoming increasingly harder to find. So to solve this, I think the Battlefield Studios team can do a number of different things actually, but perhaps the most important and the most simple bits of feedback that I can give: build your maps to be a bit larger and build your maps around different playstyles. By simply increasing the amount of space on a map, you lessen the emphasis on pure infantry gameplay, and you'd encourage those players to get into transport vehicles to move from point to point. You'd also slightly increase the downtime each player is afforded after a gunfight or a battle when they're on a capture point, by allowing them to just take stock and feel like they've got a little bit of room to breathe. Increasing the map size would also elevate armored vehicle gameplay, chopper versus ground combat, jet versus ground combat, and so on and so on. One really solid idea that I've seen from the community around this topic would be the introduction of naval warfare back into the franchise, with the addition of some maps that have sea combat in them. I'm thinking back to Battlefield 4, we actually had an entire DLC dedicated to this, but I think the launch map, Paracel Storm, was probably the best. Multiple islands where infantry could hop from point to point, or players could hop on jet skis, or take a rib boat or an attack boat and patrol the waves. Then you've got transport choppers and little birds and jets in the sky, all fighting over different parts of play space. Vehicles and infantry working together and fighting against one another. By increasing the space on the map and focusing gameplay around multiple different elements of the Battlefield sandbox, that rock, paper, scissors that we used to talk about, you ended up with all the different types of gameplay being elevated to a much greater level. There wasn't a need for aggressively short time to engagement because there were so many other different types of ways that you could play on the map. So overall, I think increasing the size of Battlefield 6's maps in future seasons, opening up that play space a bit, would have a positive effect on the gameplay variety and the gameplay quality outside of just infantry. There is no denying the infantry experience in Battlefield 6 is very good. That's not up for debate. The debate is, should it be the only experience that is really good on every single map in the game? I think the answer to that question is no. There should be multiple maps in the game that support lots of different types of gameplay. Next up, I wanted to touch on the way that Battlefield 6 looks, and hopefully continues to look. The theme that they've gone for. Because there's been a bit of debate about whether the devs at Battlefield Studios are really sticking to their word about keeping the game as this grounded, military-inspired shooter when it comes to some of the cosmetics that are being added to it. You might have seen recently, one of the skins for the Razer collaboration had this really vibrant green element to it. Got picked up on social media and Reddit as an example that really goes against what the devs said. It stepped over the threshold. Now, to their credit, the devs took that skin back and they toned down the green elements of the skin, and today it looks like this, which is much more in tone with the game overall. It's still a military-inspired skin, but it's got a bit of green flair on it that you may notice, but it's not going to massively stand out anymore. So, fair play to the devs there. However, the issues didn't stop with that one, because there was another one called Wicked Grin that was lined up for Season 1 that had these bright blue accents to it and a massive grin on a mask on the soldier's face. So, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times and it becomes a pattern. So hopefully we're not going to make it to that point. Now again, similar to the green Razer skin, that Wicked Grin skin has disappeared from the game for the time being, and we can only assume it's being adjusted and will be reintroduced at some point. So once again, fair play to the devs for listening to player feedback and making a change that will result in a better overall outcome for everyone. But this is now twice that we've seen problematic skins enter the game at an early stage. just after launch. And of course, there are several other skins in the game already that are close to that line, and maybe depending on how you feel, maybe go over the line that the devs said they'd stick to. So I think it's safe to assume that there might be a plan to introduce more and more of these skins that are either very close to or over the mark in the future. If that continues to happen, I think that would be a big mistake. I sincerely hope the developers have heeded the calls already from the community during launch in Season 1, and they make some adjustments behind the scenes for those skins that have not been released yet to make sure that they stick to that grounded military theme. Look, I'm not stupid. I know that the skins in this game will have some flair to them, and they will push the boundaries of what is acceptable in a game that was marketed and sold as that grounded military shooter. But there is a difference between a bit of flair and overly garish embellishment. The line was drawn in the sand by the developers themselves before launch when they gave statements about what the game is and would continue to be when it came to theme. I really hope the developers stick to that. The recent introduction of the Panopticon 8 unit skins for Pax Armata and the 323 unit skins for NATO, I think those are good examples of skins that keep themselves on the right side of the debate, adding some cool flair to the game with different skin options, whilst keeping them grounded in reality. Whatever you think about the 323 being a paid skin set versus the Panopticon 8 being part of the Battle Pass, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to it. But in general, these are the types of skins that I want to continue seeing from the Battlefield Studios devs. We know this game is going to continue being supported by microtransactions. It's a part of gaming in 2025, full game price or completely free to play. All these games are supported by microtransactions, so more skins will be coming. But I hope those fall in line with the game's general style and feel as it was sold to us in the first place. Next, I wanted to talk about game modes and how they're being handled in Battlefield 6. You might have seen with the California Resistance update a few days ago, a new limited time game mode was added called Sabotage. It's this small-scale 8v8 game mode. Attackers have to destroy caches, and defenders have to limit their scoring in a 5-minute round, and then it flips around and the other team does the opposite. It's not very Battlefield, if you ask me. The rumor is that there are currently 8 or 9 different game modes in development at Battlefield Studios that are supposedly going to be introduced during the game's post-launch seasons. And whilst that might sound like a lot of content, and it is a lot of content, I actually think that's a negative thing when it comes to game modes, so let me explain. Firstly, these game modes are going to contribute to an already bloated list of game modes that Battlefield 6 currently supports. Sabotage being limited time somewhat softens that impact, but they are still listed in the game right now, and that game mode is intrinsically linked to the limited time rewards of the California Resistance update. So it's going to take players away from the main modes that the game offers to play something that is really not a Battlefield game mode, in my opinion. The true Battlefield modes that should be the reason for players to come to game in the first place are now going to have less players playing them. Secondly, if we take the introduction of Sabotage as a yardstick for the quality of these rumoured 8 or 9 more game modes that are in development, that's not going to be very good. Sabotage is not a good game mode, and it feels like something that could have been cooked up in Portal in about 5 minutes. And that's no disrespect to the person that made it, that's just my opinion on it. If the game keeps getting filled with mediocre or poor game modes as opposed to focusing on the core modes that people know and love Battlefield for, you may end up putting off players engaging with that content altogether. And thirdly, it's kind of linked to my first point, Battlefield 6 has one of the worst front-end menu UIs that I have ever used in a video game. It's right up there with Modern Warfare 2, using these Hulu, Netflix-style tiles that just take up so much ridiculous amounts of space. Imagine having 8 or 9 other game modes shoved into those tiles. That's going to make it almost impossible to find what you're looking for. And with the continued resistance to putting these quick play persistent servers properly highlighted in the server browser, it's going to be awful to try and get to the game modes that you want to play, let's say in 8 months' time, when there's 6 more game modes in the game. Personally, if it was me, I'd not put all these new game mode ideas into the game, and instead I'd refocus efforts on the current game modes and how they can be improved. I'm looking at Rush as one of the worst implementations of that game mode in any Battlefield game ever since it was first introduced, and how that could be improved. Rush could be so much better than it currently is right now. And all of that effort, instead of making new game modes, could go into making Rush better. You could also do the same with Breakthrough as well. I think Breakthrough is a really poor implementation of the game mode in Battlefield 6, and I think a lot of work could be done across all of the maps currently in the game to improve it, specifically looking at the sectors, how small they are, whether you could move around some of the capture points to make the flow of the maps better. There's so many different things you could do. And I actually look at Escalation as an evolution of Conquest, and look at how well that's doing. Escalation is a fantastic game mode in Battlefield 6. So instead of putting efforts into new game modes, I'd look at the current ones and try and make them better, and then link those into the limited time events. You could add modifiers or setting changes to those actual game modes that you've already got and build events around those instead. Now, I touched on this in a previous point, but I do want to highlight it as something that I think will continue to be a burden on Battlefield 6's reputation as time goes on if it's not acted upon soon. Adding the quick play servers into the server browser. I've had a lot of emails and messages on social media from people in different regions who've asked me to highlight this. I literally get comments on it from every single video as well. It's a more acute problem for people in certain regions than it is for, say, players like me in a really populated region like the EU or players in North America, for example. So lots of players in less populated regions who end up using the tiles in the menu to matchmake for game modes, they get into a lot of lobbies that are now filled with bots. And in general, it's taking quite a long time for those games to fill up effectively. Now, in previous Battlefield titles, that issue could be resolved by those players using the server browser to join official quick play persistent servers. And they could then get into full matches, or they could choose specific servers based on what map or game mode that they want to play. Sounds pretty simple. So why can't we have that in Battlefield 6? I can see that for heavily populated regions like North America and the European Union, the matchmaking system works pretty well. And I've had an almost 100% success rate since the first few days after launch using the custom search feature to find a specific map and mode setup and getting into those servers. It's pretty easy for me in the EU. But that likely isn't the same experience for everyone. So having that fallback, that fail-safe option of using the server browser would be great for those players who struggle a little bit more with the matchmaking system. So giving players more options is surely a good thing, right? Why can't we have that in Battlefield 6? Genuine question. So those are my headline bigger elements of how I think Battlefield Studios could improve Battlefield 6 overall. I'm actually going to do a separate video on Battlefield RedSec because I've got some specific feedback there as well, but I didn't want to cloud this video because I was trying to focus specifically on the multiplayer experience. But how do you guys feel about Battlefield 6 at the moment? Are you still enjoying it? Are you liking it less? Is it the game you thought it would be? Has the Season 1 update been good for you guys? Leave all your thoughts down below in the comments, and hit thumbs up on any down there that you agree with as well. I think the addition of larger maps and focusing on different aspects of gameplay, instead of solely trying to craft experiences that keep the time to engagement to a minimum, are the game's biggest issues right now. And if that's not addressed over time, I think players will become bored with the experience, and they'll end up looking for something new. As it stands at the moment, though, I am enjoying Battlefield 6, but those issues will likely collect up and bring themselves to a head over time if they're not addressed in the coming weeks and the coming months. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll catch you soon.